After the Denver Broncos' 16-9 victory over the Houston Texans, we handed out game balls to players on the offense, defense, and special teams side of the ball. The Broncos defense came out big. Who gets a game ball on the defensive side of the ball? You get that and much more in today's brand new special episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode, Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much, everybody in Broncos country, for tuning in and making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day, every single day, free and available everywhere you get your podcast in audio format, or whether you watch us on YouTube. We appreciate you so much. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, Broncos beat reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my co-host, as always, Sayre Bedinger, site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Sayre, my friend, we broke down the game on yesterday's episode, Locked on Broncos, immediately following the Broncos' victory against the Houston Texans at Empire Field at Mile High. But now we get to spend a little bit more time focusing on specific players, handing out game balls on offense. As granted, as ugly as it was, there were some players who deserve a game ball. Defense and special teams. Let's start things off here with the defensive side of the ball here. And I think a huge one that stands out to me, the Broncos' key free agent offseason acquisition, Randy Gregory, right? The offseason shoulder surgery had a lot of Broncos fans saying, well, when he comes back, we need to see him perform really well because it was such a big investment by general manager George Paton and the Broncos. I tell you what, man, he plays with a high motor, and through 2 games, I really like what I've seen from Randy Gregory. I'm going to give him a game ball in this game. I know you're in agreement with it. He had a sack on the day. He was an impact player for Denver defensively, and man, his presence was there, and I felt like the officials missed a couple of calls where he was clearly held while trying to pressure Davis Mills, but you know what? He had a big moment in the fourth quarter coming up big for the Broncos defense.
He really did. That strip sack on Texans quarterback Davis Mills. I mean, he almost literally walked away from this game with a game ball, a strip sack that Bradley Chubb almost recovered it there. It kind of just bounced away from him, as these fumbles seem to be doing lately for the Denver Broncos, but obviously, we're highlighting the great performance from Randy Gregory in this game. Cody, I think as we go back, when we get the chance to go back and watch the all 22 of this game, I feel like everybody that gets a chance to watch that all 22 is going to come away very impressed by the way the edge duo played in this game. I know Bradley Chubb didn't necessarily have a sack. Randy Gregory got the strip sack. He also had a tackle for loss where he was untouched and looked like he was absolutely shot out of a cannon on a certain play in the first half. But man, the edge players were kind of all over it in this game. And that's saying a lot because they were going up against Laramie Tunsil. They were going up against Titus Howard, who's been a starter for a while there in Houston. So definitely, to me, Cody, the edge guys really came away in this game in a big way, and they made a huge impact down the line. It's kind of like when you're talking about a great running game, you may only be averaging, 5-6 yards a carry or 4 or 5 yards a carry, but you're wearing a defense down. I felt like the pass rush kind of did their equivalent of that on that side. They may not have been getting strip sacks all game long from the first quarter on, but they were wearing those tackles down so much that by the fourth quarter, and things just kind of came caving in for the Houston Texans. And it ended up being the difference maker. Anytime you have an ugly win, or we call it an ugly win, anytime there's an ugly win like this, you're bound to have some guys on your defense playing well. But Randy Gregory wasn't the only one on that defensive front who had a big game against Houston.
No, spot on. While Randy Gregory gets the ball from the edge rusher side, I think you were spot on with what you said about Bradley Chubb, but can we also talk about Baron Browning for a moment? He had several plays where he was just so close to getting to the quarterback, but there was one play in particular. He beat Laramie Tunsil, I believe, or it was one of the tackles. I'm not sure which one it was, but he also beat the tackle, and he also destroyed Damian Pearson pass protection on one play early on in that game there. I was really impressed with what the Broncos did with those 3 guys. I think that is a 3-headed monster when we talk about that rotation. But you also talk about another guy who's a beast on the defensive line. Draymond Jones had a big game, and Sayre, you and I have said it. This is a contract year for Dre'Mont, and everything that we've seen in the first couple of weeks from him seemed to indicate that he's still playing at the high level. We've seen him play since he became a Denver Bronco, but this time it's showing up in the stat sheet here early on, and he had 2 sacks in this game, including a forced fumble that unfortunately, once again, the Broncos just simply couldn't recover it. But man, was he a force against the quarterback? Was he a force against the run? Draymond Jones is a damn good player, and he gets a game ball.
He definitely does. You just see almost every play. It felt like 93 was standing in the backfield. Once again, we're going to watch this all 22 tape. Again, ugly wins typically mean your defense dominated. The Broncos, when was the last time they allowed a touchdown, Cody? It was the first half against Seattle. So 6 straight quarters they've gone without allowing a touchdown. This defense, I mean, it wasn't even quite bend, don't break. There was a lot of just dominance from them throughout this game. When the Broncos offense desperately needed it, the defense go out and get a 3-and-out. Or if the Texans started moving the ball a little bit, Randy Gregory slaps the ball out of Davis Mills' hands, or Dre'Mont Jones slaps out of his hands. So to me, Cody, it was a great performance from all these guys, but I think we got to give credit where it's due here. I mean, I think there's got to be somebody in the comments that's been waiting for this, but I'm giving a game ball, Cody, to linebacker Alex Singleton. 5 tackles, 2 passes broken up, and to me, here's the biggest thing. Josie Jewell did not play in this game. He was inactive, obviously, with the calf injury. Justin Simmons, obviously, also on injured reserve with the quad injury. Alex Singleton has a huge burden of responsibility to handle the communication as the guy with the dot on his helmet. He's the one that's relaying the play calls. He's the one that's out there communicating to everybody. Given the fact that from the start of training camp, literally from day 1 or 2, we were talking about there's no competition. It's Jonas Griffith, it's Josie Jewell, and everybody else. Alex Singleton he came out in the first game. I thought he played a really, really good second half, really good game overall when you look at just a couple of plays here or there. But to me, Cody, he deserves a game ball in this game just for going out there and leading this defense, leading the communication aspect. I think that can't be overstated, and he deserves the kudos for it.
Well, and one of those pass breakups, too, I mean, he thwarted what would have been probably a touchdown. It was a pass to a wide receiver coming across the middle. He jumps up, gets his hand up, knocks it down. That was a huge play for him. I saw some fans tweeting out, oh, why is Singleton in the game? But, because there were people catching the ball in the middle of the field, people automatically assume, oh, that's Singleton's fault. Houston, I thought they did a really good job. They would send 2 to 3 players into the middle of the field. So for Singleton, he's got to pick one, right? And I think that for the most part, we'll go back on the film, I think he picked the right guy for the most part, and everyone else is just rally and tackle at that point, especially from the safeties coming downhill. But Singleton has played really well in these first 2 games. Not a lot of fans are going to understand that, but if you actually go back and you watch the film and you see what his true responsibility was, he had a really, really good game for this Broncos team. And folks, please don't ever come at us with PFF grades. That is the most meaningless metric that you can ever mention when trying to justify an argument. These guys have no idea what they're looking at. They have no idea what a player's assignment is. So PFF grades don't mean jack squat outside of player snaps and where a player lined up and percentages like that. That's the only value there. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. We're going to dive a little bit deeper into the offense. Despite how ugly the performance was from the offensive unit, there's some game balls to be handed out, plus the special team side. You get to that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about Prize Picks, the sponsor of today's episode, Locked On Broncos. And Prize Picks is daily fantasy sports that is done right. And with the Prize Picks app, you can choose 2 to 5 players that you're focused on heading into the week, and these players will have a projection that's set by Prize Picks, and you simply choose whether or not they will have more or less than their Prize Picks projection, which could allow you to win 10 times your money on any entry. There's no competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. So download the PrizePicks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. And first-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. And if you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign-up for an instant deposit match up to $100. And our good friends over there at Nugenix. And if you feel like you just can't get in shape, well, it's not your fault. As men age, our body naturally loses more testosterone, the man hormone. And it happens to every man. It can make it more difficult to stay in shape and be active and energetic. If you want more energy to counter the negative physical effects of aging, Nugenix Total T Testosterone Booster with Testofen will help you turn back the clock, re-energize your workouts, get you better results at the gym, and help you look and feel like the man that you really want to be. And Nugenix Total T contains man-boosting key ingredients like testofen. It has been validated in 5 clinical studies to show boost free testosterone levels in men. And while every product professes quality, many other products use generic ingredients that are often far less than clinical grade. And with Nugenix Total T, you get the same clinical potency levels used in the trials, and Nugenix formulation is backed by 10 years of science and research. Nugenix Total T is the number one selling testosterone booster at GNC. Now get a complimentary bottle of Nugenix Total T when you text NFL to 231-231. Text now and get a bottle of Nugenix Thermo, their most powerful fat incinerator ever, with key ingredients to help you get back into shape fast. Absolutely free. Text NFL to 231-231. Text NFL to 231-231. All right, sir, continue on today's episode of Lockdown Broncos here on your favorite audio podcasting platforms, or whether you're watching on YouTube. Broncos Country, thank you for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Handing out game balls on Victory Monday here for Broncos Country. And we also want to know if you have any game ball candidates you want to throw out in the YouTube comment section down below. Make sure you do that. Sayre, let's start on the special team side of the ball, then we'll transition our way. We'll close out with the offense here. Special teams, I think it's pretty easy. There's two guys that really stand out in here. We talked about it in the post-game report. Montrell Washington demonstrated some flashes in the return game and showed why the Broncos absolutely drafted him. 14.8 yards per return, good vision, and he was hard to bring down, which I think was a very promising sign. But more importantly, he demonstrated great focus, tracking the football in the air while moving backwards, fielding it, and then making plays happen for the Broncos. He gets a game ball.
He does. I just love this guy's confidence. You know, he talks about how, I remember when he was drafted, he kind of compared his mindset in punt returning to, like, when you're out on the playground and somebody just chucks the ball and one person at the other end of the playground just catches it and it's like one for all and all for one. You know, he kind of acts like that out on the field, and he's just such a natural, like you said, tracking the ball. And then once he gets the ball, it's like he's already planned what he's going to do in his mind. There was one return that he had, Cody, where I was certain that he was going to get absolutely decked. And he made a shifty move to the inside and made some yards. I mean, he just creates yardage in the return game. He's a special player, and I think the sky's the limit for him. I hope we see a couple return touchdowns from him this year. He certainly deserves it with the way that he's playing. But also, Cody, I think a game ball's got to go to Brandon McManus. Had a clutch 50-yard field goal late in the game. Obviously, 3 for 3 kicking overall. There were a couple times where we would have obviously rather have seen him out there for an extra point than a field goal when the Broncos would get close to the red zone, which has become kind of the dead zone more lately. It sounds like the Broncos may need, some kind of pick me up or some kind of boost, in the red zone there. We'll see kind of what happens over the course of the next few weeks, but that's where they're really struggling right now. But Brandon McManus is kind of helping them overcome that with his ability in the kicking game. He's still very good, very clutch, and he came through for the Broncos on Sunday.
I mean, there were times where McManus came onto the field and the team booed, not the team, but the fans booed him. And I was like, it's not Brandon's fault. Like, stop getting mad at Brandon McManus. Brandon McManus has been a really good kicker. Now, I do think there's probably a little bit more realism in a conversation to be had. Should the Broncos be kicking 60-plus yard field goals with McManus in a game? Probably not, right? Like, unless it's like a last-ditch effort, let's say it's 4th and 15, you have 2 seconds left and you have to kick a field goal, that's fine. But I think, for McManus, I think 55 on, like from lesser, 55 and lower, I think are the perfect frames, I think, for McManus to kind of boot a field goal. But you know what? He did exactly what was asked of him. Put it through the uprights, convert on it. Now, granted, one of them was taken away due to a delay of game penalty, but ultimately he made his extra points. He made all field goal attempts that, were called upon him. That's all you can ask for here for McManus. But we'll see what the Broncos' approach is a little bit going forward, especially with some distance at Empire Field at Mile High. We'll see if they change things up or allow him to kick anything longer than 55-plus at some point. But the Broncos have a lot more that they need to clean up before we ever get to that conversation. Now let's transition to the offensive side of the ball. Let's talk about Javonte Williams. I mean, Sayre, for the first couple of weeks of the NFL season, everyone's been talking about feed Pookie, feed Javonte Williams, let Javonte Williams eat. I feel like when you look at his overall volume, he's eaten. I mean, he was a hard guy to bring down for the Houston Texans who, they had to fight and claw to limit Jonathan Taylor, who had over 100 yards in her week 1 matchup initially. But Javonte Williams was running at ease, 6.6 yards per carry initially. He finishes the game with 15 carries for 75 yards, but also a catch out of the backfield for 10 yards. You see exactly why Javonte Williams is the guy that they envisioned for this offense. There's a lot of things he does well, and in my opinion, Sayre, got to, I think, feed him even more. And the Broncos abandoned the run game a little bit in the game against the Texans. Keep running the ball. It was working with Javonte Williams. Make sure you keep feeding him.
Yeah, exactly. And I know he fumbled against Seattle in the goal line situation, Cody, but at the same time, I think you got to force feed that situation until you can figure it out, right? Because he has to be a key part of the offense at that part of the field. When you get down close to scoring, you have a running back that is known for his ability to break tackles, that is known for his ability to get past initial contact, and he's averaging 6 yards a carry, and you can't rely on him to score from 1 or 2 yards out. That to me is a huge problem. Just one play before the Broncos stalled at the 1 yard line once again, Cody, Javonte had a 5-yard run to get them up to the 1 yard line. So to me, I want to see Javonte eating a little bit more, but at the same time, you're exactly right. He led the team in receptions in week 1. He obviously led the team in carries in week 2, and he was very good in this game. I was really impressed, and I was impressed by the fact that he went out there and he kind of did what we talked about with Montrell Washington. He created some yards where there weren't always yards to be had. Even some of those plays where he could have been stopped at the line of scrimmage, he fell forward for 3 yards, or a play looked almost dead behind the line of scrimmage, and all of a sudden he's scampering for 17 yards down the field. It was an impressive outing from Javonte. Obviously, we all want to see him go off for 150 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns, but at the same time, we've seen some good things from him. I do think give Javonte the ball instead of Andrew Beck in that certain situation. But, you know, those are things that we can debate all day long. The fact of the matter is Javonte, to me, he gets a game ball. It wasn't a perfect performance, wasn't a flawless performance. He wasn't perfectly utilized, or the Broncos could have used him more. But at the same time, I think he was one of the offensive stars in this game for sure.
Well, the other star, too, the headline guy, Cortland Sutton, coming up with a big-time performance as a captain in a key moment when one other player that is a big impact player for their offense went down. 7 catches, 122 yards, and just once again coming up big and being reliable, right? There were some tough catches that he hauled in, and he almost had that one touchdown on the back shoulder where he barely just, once again, I was like, oh man, game of inches. And I immediately thought of Vic Fangio's death by inches quote thing like that when that came up, and I didn't want to tweet it out because I know how triggering that could be for Broncos country. Just some, missed opportunity there. He could have even had a bigger game if that were to stand initially, because it was ruled a touchdown, overturned due to replay. But I thought that he shouldered the load when Jerry Jeudy went down. I thought we saw a lot of him as a leader, as the resilient type, and you saw exactly why he was the captain, in my opinion. Perfect candidate here for a game ball.
He really is. He embodied what it means to be a captain. Other than that penalty that we talked about, the personal foul, I think it was a pretty outstanding game from Cortland Sutton. The clutch play on 4th down, the clutch play late on 3rd and long, where the Broncos just desperately needed something, anything from their offense, and Cortland Sutton was the guy to provide it once again. Came this close, like you said, to that touchdown. It was an amazing play. I mean, my goodness, it was a great catch. I was sitting there watching the broadcast thinking to myself, man, first of all, how did he catch it? Second of all, how did he get his feet in? Well, now we know he didn't quite get his feet in, but it was, again, just barely off. So Cortland Sutton is reestablishing himself. As we talked about in the offseason, this was one of the important things for the Broncos, is that he reestablished himself as a true alpha at the wide receiver 1 position. So far, so good in the 2022 season.
Broncos country, let us know your game ball candidates down below if you're watching on YouTube. Thank you so much for tuning in and making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day. Tomorrow's episode of Locked On Broncos, we're hoping to have a little bit more on Broncos wide receiver Jerry Jeudy, cornerback Patrick Surtain with the injuries that they sustained in the Broncos' 16-9 victory over the Houston Texans on Sunday at Empower Field at Mile High. Now the Broncos' focus shifts to the San Francisco 49ers. You get that and much more on tomorrow's brand new episode, Locked On Broncos.